The clock now stands at 90 seconds to midnight. And with that sentence, the world entered its most dangerous point, without realizing it. There are things that don't seem urgent until they are. A clock on a wall, a number in a report, a group of scientists speaking in low voices. But this clock doesn't measure hours. It measures how close we are to disappearing. It's called the Doomsday Clock. And it isn't made of gears. It's made of human decisions. But the story begins earlier, before the clock, with an idea, a dangerous one. In 1938, in a laboratory in Germany, scientists discovered something that should have remained theoretical: nuclear fission, the ability to split an atom and release an enormous amount of energy. At first it was simply a scientific breakthrough, but very quickly it became something else, something governments could not ignore. The United States moved first, and the Manhattan Project began in absolute secrecy, bringing together thousands of scientists and engineers across multiple hidden locations with one clear objective: to build a weapon unlike anything seen before. And at its center was J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man chosen to lead a project that would change history forever. A man who understood that what they were creating was not just a bomb, but a point of no return. On July 16, 1945, at exactly 5:29 in the morning in the desert of New Mexico, the first nuclear explosion in history took place, the Trinity test. A flash brighter than the sun lit up the sky, followed by a shockwave that confirmed it. The weapon worked, and in that moment, humanity entered the nuclear age. Less than a month later, that same power was used in war. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 in the morning, Hiroshima, Japan, was struck by an atomic bomb dropped from the Enola Gay, and in less than a second, the city was transformed. A blinding flash, extreme heat, and a shockwave erased entire neighborhoods. Tens of thousands of people died instantly, and many more would die in the following weeks and months from burns and radiation. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, at 11:02 in the morning, Nagasaki was hit by a second bomb. Another city destroyed, another irreversible moment. Shortly after, Japan surrendered and World War II ended. But what had begun did not end there, because those two explosions proved something that could never be undone. Humanity now had the power to destroy itself. What followed was not peace, but escalation. The Soviet Union developed its own atomic bomb in 1949, and soon after, both sides began building more powerful weapons, hydrogen bombs capable of destruction on a scale far beyond Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By the height of the Cold War, both sides had accumulated thousands of nuclear warheads, enough to destroy the world many times over. Missiles could be launched in minutes, and decisions had to be made in seconds. In October 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. It began with reconnaissance images revealing Soviet missile installations in Cuba, nuclear weapons placed within striking distance of the United States, and the response was immediate. President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade, and suddenly the entire world was locked in a silent confrontation where every movement mattered. For 13 days, the situation escalated. Soviet ships approached the blockade line. US forces prepared for conflict. Nuclear weapons on both sides were placed on high alert, and beneath the ocean, submarines carrying nuclear torpedoes operated with limited communication, unsure if war had already begun. And in one of those submarines, a decision was about to be made that could have ended everything. The crew believed they were under attack. The pressure was intense, the conditions were extreme, and the protocol required agreement to launch a nuclear torpedo. But one officer refused. He chose not to escalate. He chose to wait, and that single decision made in isolation may have prevented nuclear war. Back on land, negotiations continued between Kennedy and Khrushchev. Messages were exchanged carefully, sometimes publicly, sometimes in secret. Every word carried weight. Every delay increased the risk. and the tension remained constant, because one misunderstanding could have triggered a chain reaction impossible to stop. Eventually, an agreement was reached. The Soviet Union would withdraw its missiles from Cuba, and the United States would remove its missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended not with victory but with relief. The world stepped back from the edge, not because it was safe, but because it was lucky. But the story doesn't end there, because stepping back from the edge is not the same as moving away from it. And after 1962, the world did not become safer. It simply became quieter, more complex, more dependent on systems that could fail in ways no one fully understood. In 1983, inside a Soviet early warning facility, a signal appeared on a screen. It was simple, direct, and terrifying. Multiple incoming missiles detected from the United States. The system was designed for one purpose: to give enough time to respond, not to question but to act. Protocol demanded escalation, a report up the chain of command, a possible retaliation, a sequence that once started would not stop. But the officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, looked at the data and something didn't feel right. The system was new, the number of missiles seemed too small for a real attack, and instead of following procedure, he made a decision. He reported it as a false alarm and chose not to trigger a response. The cause was later identified as sunlight reflecting off clouds, a natural phenomenon misinterpreted as a nuclear strike. A simple error that could have led to irreversible consequences. Just weeks later, another moment unfolded. NATO began a military exercise known as Able Archer 83. It was meant to simulate nuclear escalation, to test communication and readiness. But this time the simulation appeared real. Soviet intelligence detected unusual activity, encrypted transmissions, movements that matched what a real first strike could look like. Fear filled the uncertainty. Soviet forces prepared for the possibility that the exercise was a cover for an actual attack. Nuclear units were placed on alert, weapons were readied, and once again the world moved dangerously close to a conflict no one officially intended to start. The exercise ended, and the tension gradually subsided, but the implications remained. The line between simulation and reality had become dangerously thin. In 1995, years after the Cold War had officially ended, another alarm was triggered. A rocket launched from Norway to study the northern lights rose into the sky. It was scientific, harmless, and previously announced, but the information did not reach the correct channels. Russian radar detected it and interpreted its trajectory as a possible submarine-launched nuclear missile, something designed to disable defenses before a larger strike. Within minutes, the alert escalated to the highest level. The nuclear briefcase was activated. President Boris Yeltsin was informed, and for the first time a leader had to consider a nuclear response under extreme time pressure. As more data became available, the trajectory was reassessed, and it became clear the rocket posed no threat. The alert was cancelled, and the situation was resolved before escalation could occur. Another instance where misinterpretation nearly triggered a global disaster. These moments were not isolated, they formed a pattern. There were incidents where nuclear weapons were dropped, where safety systems failed or came dangerously close to failing, each one revealing how fragile control could be under real conditions. From that accumulation of risks, from that constant tension at the edge of the irreversible, a way of measuring the impossible emerged, not time, but proximity to disaster. Thus was born the so-called Doomsday Clock, not as a physical object, but as a symbolic warning created by scientists. Its hands are adjusted forward or backward depending on how close humanity is judged to be to global catastrophe. The closer it moves to midnight, the greater the perceived risk of total destruction. It is not a prediction, but a reflection of the world's current level of danger. A reminder of how close we have been to the end and how little it has taken. And now, decades later, the clock stands at 90 seconds to midnight, not because of a single event, but because of accumulated risk. The weapons still exist, the systems are faster, the margin for error is smaller, and the decisions that once took hours can now happen in minutes or seconds. That is what makes this so unsettling, because it is not just history, it is a pattern. That is what the clock measures, because the difference between survival and destruction has never been measured in years or months. It has always been measured in moments, in seconds, and right now, we are closer than we have ever been.